The original Sonic Drift was an experience that felt half-baked at the best of times. Released in 1994 as Sega's own take on the formula which Super Mario Kart had utilized to such success, the company chose to forgo their Genesis home console and instead develop it exclusively for their Game Gear handheld. This resulted in Sonic Drift being constrained to hardware which at that point dated back nearly a decade, and it shows. The courses all look nearly identical, with different environments essentially being simple palette swaps of each other, while the CPUs you race against pose almost no challenge whatsoever. In short, it's a pretty poor experience. Clearly, Sega agreed with this sentiment, with the game never being released outside of Japan. However, the next year they returned with a sequel that would supposedly rectify everything wrong with its predecessor. Sonic Drift 2. It's still on Game Gear, so we can determine that to be a lie. Apart from this, though, I'm happy to say that Sonic Drift 2 is an improvement over the first game in nearly every way. All 4 characters from Sonic Drift are here, with only minor changes to their individual gameplay. Sonic is fast but handles poorly, Tails is the all-around balanced option, Amy accelerates quickly but has poor top speed, and Eggman corners well but struggles to get up to speed. The special abilities here are also nearly identical to those in the first game, with Sonic receiving a speed boost, Tails jumping through the air, Eggman dropping bombs, and Amy throwing hearts that reduce the target's speed. However, the original game's roster also gets a much-needed expansion as 3 new characters have been added, bringing the total number of characters up to 7. Knuckles features balanced stats similar to Tails, but can punch out other racers as well as jumping through the air as a special move. Fang plays similar to Sonic with a high top speed and poor handling, but drops oil slicks instead of receiving speed boosts. Metal Sonic is my favorite addition here, not only possessing a higher top speed than Sonic, but also has a more powerful boost at the cost of taking 3 rings to activate instead of just 1. The CPUs are far more aggressive here, using their special abilities more often as well as doing a better job at keeping pace with the player. Much like its predecessor, Sonic Drift 2 features 3 cups composed of 6 races each. While the courses here are more memorable than the ones in the original game, it's still far from perfect, as several tracks still feel like bland palette swaps of each other. Despite this, I'm happy to say that there are still a few levels worth talking about here. Dark Valley 1 and 2 take place on a mountain with no barriers and the threat of falling off on either side of the track, as well as stages where you have to jump across gaps in the course itself. Both Desert Valley 1 and Ice Cap are fast courses featuring large banked turns covered in rings. However, the game's perspective somewhat spoils this, as it's difficult to judge where the rings actually are relative to yourself. Rainy Savannah. Who thought this was a good idea? Death Egg is the final course of the Blue Chaos GP, set inside Eggman's base from the Genesis games. Shaped like the outline of Eggman's head, the course isn't all that enjoyable to race on, being mostly made up of tight turns. What is interesting, however, is what happens if you place first in every race in the Blue Chaos GP, including Death Egg. This takes you to the final GP, where you duel against a lone rival around the Death Egg course. Unfortunately, this is a bit of an anticlimax, as the CPU here isn't faster or any more difficult than the ones found in normal gameplay. After winning, the end credits play, leaving me with only one question. How does this compare to Super Mario Kart? Right, it's still on Game Gear.